Hello friends, relatives, and internet people. This is Dan, and this is my shelter-in-place sourdough recipe. I like making healthy, easy sourdough. And I bake like I cook, which is kind of by feel, which might be frustrating, but stick with this. Hopefully it'll show you that baking is a lot easier than you thought it would be. What do I mean by healthy? I think that bread should be there not just to keep mayonnaise off your hands. I think it should be part of a healthy meal. So I use a good flour, high protein flour. In this case, I'm using King Arthur. I use chia, I use flax seed, and I use hemp hearts. So you're getting protein, calcium, and fiber boosts in every slice. The problem with whole grain breads, however, is that they can be dense and they can be dry. So I've designed this whole method to overcome those things as much as you can. And the other thing is I ran out of whole grain flour, and now I'm using King Arthur bread flour. My family seems to like it a lot better. But when I get the whole grain, I'm going to switch back to that because I'm the guy who's baking it. So here we go. I use 3 cups of flour. This is 1 cup of my whole grain flour, 2 cups of King Arthur bread flour, but you can use 3 cups of whatever flour you have. I put in half a cup of starter and then just a pinch of regular yeast, and then I let the whole thing sit for 12 to 24 hours, depending on what my schedule is like. This is my starter. If you're interested in starter, you can just Google sourdough starter. There's a million recipes. The way that I do it is I put 3 cups of flour into a measuring cup. Glass is better so you can see when the bubbles start forming. And then just put that on your counter and let the natural yeast that are in the air do their work. They will land on your flour. They will begin devouring it. And when they do, they produce CO2, so you'll start to see bubbles. I do stir it about once a day when I'm creating my starter at first, but it really is that easy. And yeast everywhere is going to be a little different. That's why sourdough from San Francisco is famous, etc., etc. Anyways, it's easy. Back to the bread. Here I have about 3 cups of water handy, but it really doesn't matter how much water is in the measuring cup. What I do is I just mix it into my flour and starter until I get a more watery than average dough. Dough is not something that I touch with my hands. I've tried that and I wind up putting so much flour in that it dries out my bread. Also, I feel like if you have a little bit more water in dough, it gives your yeast a little bit more room to move, and that's just speculation on my part. But again, the problems with whole grain dough are that they can be dense and they can be dry, and I feel like this helps overcome that a little bit. Here's a pinch of just regular yeast because why not? I have it, and we don't want dense bread. So mix it up. You can see how watery it is, but that's okay. We're just going to cover it and let it sit for 12 to 24 hours. So after you wait 12 to 24 hours and the dough has doubled in size, you put in your additives, including chia, ground flax meal, and hemp. How much you put in, you can see I just spread it over the top, maybe 1/8 to 1/4 cup. All of this for nutritional value, and then 2 teaspoons of salt. And then I mix it. And you'll notice that I never touch this dough with my hands. When you think of people making bread, you think of large countertops, and you think of people throwing dough around and patting it, and they have big forearms and everything. I just find I want to keep my dough wet, so I don't do that. I do add about maybe another 1/8 cup of flour just to make it a little bit more doughy so it doesn't stick to the bowl, so it doesn't stick to the pan. And I also throw in another pinch of yeast here. Which I'm not sure how much it helps, but again, why not? We want light, airy, moist bread as an end product. So I try and do everything that I can to facilitate that. So cover it and let it sit for about another hour. And here we go. That's my final dough. Still pretty wet. You preheat the oven with a cast iron pan. You'll see that there's a bread pan in the back. I put water in that so it steams. The steam helps the crust. And then I put parchment paper at the bottom of the pan just to make sure that the bread doesn't stick. And once again, this bread never touched by human hands. Here we go. And I'm sure somewhere a bread baking connoisseur is screaming because I'm not preforming it, I'm not doing anything. Really, you can't even take a razor blade to the top of this to make little X's to help the bread bake because it's too wet. It just won't stick. I've tried it. It doesn't work. Pop it into the oven, 450 degrees for 25 minutes. And then about 10 minutes in is when you get to make your cuts. If I were to do this again, when I do this again, I'm going to either do 2 cuts or do a tic-tac-toe board because it's just too peaky in the middle, which is okay. After the first 25 minutes, you rotate it. That's just because you might have hot spots on your oven and it helps the bread bake evenly. And 25 minutes later, you're done. Turn off the annoying beeper. There's my pot of water in the back. Here we go. Nice, beautiful brown bread. So there you go. I hope that if nothing else, this video has shown you that you don't need to be a precise chemist to get bread right. Bread is what you make it, literally. So I encourage you to, if you have never baked, get started. If you baked a long time ago and you stopped, get restarted. And if you have any questions, put them below. I will do my best to answer them. A good friend of mine writes for an online magazine, and he has an article on sourdough starter and making bread. I will connect to some of those as well. He really knows what he's doing. Here is the final product. It is light-ish, it is airy-ish, it is moist, it is acceptable to small children. So I hope this helps, and I hope you are getting by just fine. Have a great day. Here's my dog.